When I met my fiancée's parents for the first time, her mom smiled and said, "Isn't your boyfriend Jake the one who came over last night?" Her dad's smile faded. He slowly put down his glass. When Camille told me her parents finally wanted to meet me, I thought it was a good sign. We had been together for almost 2 years, and up until then, her family had been this invisible wall she never let me climb. Every time I brought them up, she'd say things like, "They're complicated," or "They just have high expectations." So when she suggested dinner at their place, I took it as progress, proof that we were moving somewhere serious. The day of the dinner, Camille was different. She wasn't her usual calm, centered self. She changed outfits 3 times, kept checking her phone, and when I told her she looked perfect, she smiled, but not at me. It was one of those smiles people give when they're trying to convince themselves of something. We drove across town to the Harlow's house, a large colonial-style home in the quiet part of Millhaven. The kind of place where the hedges are cut into perfect rectangles and every window glows warm like a postcard. I'd seen houses like that before, but walking up those steps with her hand trembling in mine, it felt like I was crossing into some kind of test. Inside, the air smelled faintly of red wine and polished oak. Her father, Robert, was tall, stern, the kind of man who measured people by their handshake. Her mother, Linda, was softer, though there was a sharpness in her eyes that made you feel like you were being scanned for flaws. She greeted me warmly, kissed Camille on the cheek, and said something about how it's lovely to finally put a face to the name. I thought things were going well. The first half hour went as expected. Small talk about work, me being a software engineer, her being an art gallery manager, the usual polite laughter, and a toast to new beginnings. But I noticed something. Every time her phone buzzed, Camille's hand twitched. She'd slide it under the table, glance at the screen, and force a smile back into place. It wasn't rude, but it was nervous, like she was afraid of missing something. When dinner was served, everything seemed fine. Her mom was talking about their last trip to Napa Valley. Her dad was explaining some investment deal he was proud of, and I was doing my best to look like a man worthy of their daughter. Then Linda turned to Camille, fork in hand, and said something that froze the air in my lungs. "So, will Jake be joining us too, dear?" The sound of her name followed by his hit, like glass shattering on tile. Camille's fork clinked against her plate. Her eyes darted toward her mother, then to me, then to her father. For a second, no one spoke. Robert's smile faltered, just slightly, and he slowly set his wine glass down. Camille laughed weakly, the kind of laugh that's too light, too fake to fool anyone. "Mom, what are you talking about?" she said. But her voice trembled. That was when Linda blinked, looking genuinely confused. "Well, Jake, the man who came over last night. I assumed he was your boyfriend. He kissed you goodbye at the door. Did I say something wrong?" Her words fell like a sledgehammer. The dining room went completely silent. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. Robert's eyes narrowed. "Last night," he repeated quietly, and I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. Camille's face went pale. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out at first. Then, finally, "He's just a coworker, Dad. He dropped off a client contract. That's all." Linda frowned. "A coworker? Well, he seemed very familiar." Camille snapped her gaze toward her mother, too sharply for it to be casual. "Mom, please." That was all she said, but the tone, the panic under it, was impossible to miss. Her father looked from her to me, and I saw it in his eyes. Doubt, disappointment, that silent calculation of a man realizing he might have just been lied to in his own house. He didn't say anything else, just picked up his glass again and drank like he was trying to swallow the tension. I smiled politely, pretending to be fine, but something inside me had already started unraveling. My fiancée's mother had just mistaken another man for me, and not because of a photo, but because she'd seen him kiss her daughter. I waited for Camille to clear it up, to say there'd been some misunderstanding, maybe a neighbor, some weird mix-up. But she didn't. She changed the subject, tried to make a joke, and when her mother didn't respond, she excused herself to the restroom. The silence she left behind was thick. Robert didn't look at me. Linda looked apologetic, but confused. I forced a smile and said something about how Camille had probably mentioned a client by that name before, just to defuse it. They both nodded, but no one believed it. Camille came back a few minutes later, eyes red like she'd cried, or maybe just rubbed them too hard. The rest of dinner limped along, quiet and uncomfortable. No one dared to bring up Jake again. Every clink of cutlery felt too loud. Every second stretched. By dessert, I wasn't tasting anything. I was just watching her. Every blink, every twitch, every moment she avoided my eyes. When we finally left, her parents were polite but distant. Robert didn't shake my hand. He simply said, "Good night, Daniel," in a tone that didn't carry warmth. Linda forced a smile, but her eyes said something else entirely, something like pity. In the car, Camille didn't speak. Not for the first 10 minutes. The only sound was the quiet hum of the tires on the road. Then, as if on cue, her phone buzzed again. She didn't check it this time. She turned it off completely, slipped it into her purse, and said softly, "My mom always says the wrong thing." I didn't respond. Not out of anger, just calculation. Because the image of Linda's face when she mentioned that kiss had been too genuine to be mistaken. Mothers don't invent stories like that. Not at a dinner table, not when meeting the man who's supposed to marry their daughter. We pulled into my apartment complex. She leaned in to kiss me goodnight, but something in me hesitated. I let her, but there was no feeling behind it. She must have noticed, because she whispered, "You believe me, right?" I said nothing, just nodded once. Then I watched her walk away toward her car, her silhouette lit by the street lamp, small and nervous. I turned to go upstairs, but as I passed by the stairwell, I heard something faint. Her voice. She was on the phone, standing by her car. The tone was low, urgent, nothing like the one she'd just used with me. "He knows," she whispered. Then a pause. "No, I didn't tell him anything. Just stop calling for now." I froze on the stairs, my hand on the railing. The call ended. She got in her car and drove off, her taillights vanishing into the dark. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Her mother's voice replayed in my head, over and over, like a broken record. "Isn't your boyfriend Jake the one who came over last night?" And Camille's, whispering outside, "He knows." I didn't have answers yet, but I had something better, doubt. And once that seed was planted, it started to grow roots faster than I could stop it. The morning after that dinner, Camille texted me as if nothing had happened. "Had a great time last night," she wrote, adding a smiley that felt mechanical. She didn't call, didn't try to explain, didn't mention her mother's question or the way her father's expression had shifted from warmth to quiet disgust. It was as if she'd rewritten the entire evening in her head and expected me to play along. I responded casually, agreeing that the dinner had been nice. But inside, I was still hearing her whisper from the parking lot, "He knows." Over the next week, Camille's behavior only confirmed what my gut already suspected. She started staying late at the gallery more often, claiming they were preparing for a major exhibit. Her phone became an extra limb, never left on a table, always face down, always on silent. When I'd walk into the room, she'd lock it automatically, like muscle memory. I didn't want to turn into the kind of person who snoops through their partner's phone, but something about the quietness around her felt staged, like she was performing calmness instead of living it. So instead of confronting her, I watched. I paid attention. One Thursday evening, she called to say she'd be home late again. "The exhibit's running behind," she said. I told her to take her time. But instead of going home, I drove downtown toward the gallery. I parked across the street, just far enough not to be noticed. It was past 9, the lights inside were off, and the closed sign hung in the window. But her car was still there, silver sedan, same dent on the rear bumper. At first, I thought maybe she was inside doing paperwork. Then I heard laughter coming from the alley behind the building. I got out of my car and followed the sound. There, near the dumpster and the loading door, stood Camille. She was leaning against the wall, head tilted back, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. Next to her was a man, tall, mid-30s, sharp suit, expensive watch, the kind of man who didn't belong near a trash bin at night. He had his jacket slung over his shoulder and was holding a cigarette. When he handed it to her, she took it like she'd done it before, like it was part of their routine. She laughed again, something he said making her push his shoulder playfully. Then she did something small but unmistakable. She brushed a piece of lint from his collar, fingers lingering longer than they should. I didn't stay long enough to see more. I turned around and left before they could notice me. The drive home felt unreal. I wasn't angry, not yet. Just hollow. Because seeing it confirmed everything I'd been trying to deny since her mother's accidental confession. The next day, Camille was cheerful again, almost too much. She brought coffee to my office and told me how proud she was of me for working so hard lately. She talked about the gallery's upcoming charity gala and how she wanted me there beside her. Her tone was normal, but I could feel the strain underneath it, the pressure of keeping a lie intact. I didn't say a word. I just nodded, smiled, and agreed to come. That evening, I received an unexpected call from Robert, her father. His voice was low, serious, and unlike the formal politeness he'd shown before. He said he wanted to talk privately, off the record. We met the next morning at a small diner on Maple Avenue. He was already there when I arrived, nursing a black coffee and looking like he hadn't slept much. He didn't waste time with small talk. He said he wanted to apologize for how dinner ended. He'd been embarrassed by the way Linda had brought up that name, Jake, and admitted that it had been eating at him ever since. Then he leaned in slightly and said something that changed the direction of everything. "Jake isn't new," he said. "I overheard Camille's sister mention him last year. Said he was helping Camille out financially after she moved into her new apartment. At the time, I thought she meant he was a client or investor. But after that dinner, I'm not so sure anymore. I asked how much help he meant. Robert hesitated, then said, enough that it bothered her mother. He didn't elaborate further. He didn't need to. I left that diner with my hands shaking. Financial help. A man her family knew. A kiss witnessed by her mother. It all started fitting together too neatly. And what made it worse was the timeline. If her sister mentioned it last year, this wasn't a recent mistake. It was an ongoing pattern. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about how she looked in that alley, carefree and radiant, as if she'd stepped out of a role she hated playing. Maybe I was the performance. Maybe I was the respectable face she needed while she lived a second life behind gallery doors. Instead of confronting her, I decided to play along. Pretend everything was normal. If she wanted to perform, I'd give her an audience. For the next few days, I acted like the perfect fiancé. Flowers delivered to her office, compliments over dinner, gentle conversations about our future. Each word I said made her relax a little more, drop her guard just enough. I wanted her to believe I'd buried my doubts. She mentioned Jake once, casually, while describing some important donor coming to the gala. She said his company sponsored half the event. When she said his name, she didn't even flinch. It was like testing me, to see if I'd react. I didn't. I just asked what kind of business he ran. She said logistics, import-export, nothing specific. I knew then that she was testing how much I knew. The next day, I confirmed her lie. A quick search showed Jake's company specialized in luxury acquisitions, art pieces, rare collections, and overseas transactions. The same field her gallery depended on. And the owner's last name matched the one printed on one of the donation receipts in our kitchen drawer. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of jealousy, but because of the realization that she wasn't just cheating emotionally. She was financially tied to this man. And whatever he was giving her, she was smart enough to disguise it behind business terms. A few nights before the gala, I drove by her apartment again. This time, I didn't hide. I parked right in front of her building and waited. Around 10, a black car pulled up. Jake stepped out, looked around, then walked toward her door with the ease of someone who'd done it many times. He rang once. She opened the door in a robe. And she didn't look surprised. I left before they saw me. Not because I couldn't face it, but because I wanted the confrontation to happen on my terms. Somewhere she couldn't spin it. Somewhere her entire image would shatter in one blow. When I got home, I pulled out my camera equipment. I wasn't planning to spy or blackmail. I just had an idea. The gala she'd been bragging about would be her stage, and I'd bring the truth into the spotlight. By the time I turned off the lights that night, my plan was already forming. It wasn't revenge for what she'd done. It was closure for the version of myself that believed her. The man she thought she fooled was gone. The one who'd take his time to make her truth unravel publicly. That man had just been born. The night of the gala arrived like a storm I'd been waiting to walk into. Camille had been talking about this event for weeks. The biggest charity auction her gallery had ever hosted. Her clients, friends, and even her parents were attending. She'd rehearsed every speech, every outfit change, every smile. On the outside, it was supposed to be her moment of triumph. To me, it was going to be her undoing. The gallery itself looked like something out of a magazine. Soft amber lights, tall white walls, champagne trays gliding between expensive suits. There was classical music in the background, polite laughter in the air, and a large red curtain near the back covering what was supposed to be the highlight piece of the night. Camille's masterpiece of curation. She spotted me almost immediately when I walked in. She looked stunning, of course, in a sleek black dress and diamond earrings that, now that I thought about it, I had never seen her buy. She ran up to me, kissed me on the cheek, and thanked me for coming. Her tone was light, but her eyes were cautious, searching. I think she was surprised I showed up at all. I smiled and handed her a small wrapped box. Inside, I said, was my personal contribution to the exhibit. She grinned, relieved that I was playing supportive fiancé again, and told one of the assistants to display it under the red curtain along with the other centerpiece works. She didn't even look inside. Good. That was the plan. Throughout the evening, I mingled with her parents, watched the way her father avoided eye contact with her, and listened to Linda's attempts to keep the conversation civil. They didn't mention Jake or the dinner disaster, but their tension was palpable, like they knew something wasn't right. And then I saw him. Jake. He walked in late, confident, surrounded by two associates. Tall, smug, expensive. He carried the kind of arrogance you only earn by getting away with things for a long time. The moment Camille saw him, she froze for half a second before recovering her composure. She didn't go to greet him immediately, but her entire body language changed. Her shoulders stiffened. Her laugh grew louder, more forced, as if she was aware of every glance. He moved toward her casually, the way someone does when they're used to being welcomed. She finally turned, smiled too widely, and introduced him to a few donors. The way they looked at each other wasn't professional. It was the way people look when they're trying not to touch in public. The hours dragged on until the auction began. Camille took the stage to give her speech, perfectly polished, every word rehearsed. She talked about art, philanthropy, and gratitude. Her parents clapped politely. Jake clapped harder. Then she smiled and gestured toward the red curtain behind her, announcing the final surprise piece donated anonymously by a personal friend of the gallery. The curtain dropped. The lights hit the frame, and the room went silent. On the canvas was a large printed photo, a still from a security camera angle showing Camille standing on our apartment's porch. Her hair messy, jacket half slipped off her shoulder, kissing Jake under the yellow glow of the porch light. You could hear the collective gasp ripple through the guests. Someone dropped their glass. Linda's hand shot to her mouth. Robert's face turned stone gray. Camille froze in place. For several seconds, she didn't even breathe. Then she stumbled toward the stage, muttering something about a mix-up and vandalism. But the image was clear, time-stamped, undeniable. People began whispering, phones lifted, snapping photos. Jake's associates backed away from him slowly, as if his reputation was contagious. Camille finally reached the frame and tried to yank it down, but the hooks held. She turned toward me. Our eyes met across the room. That look, it wasn't guilt. It was terror. I didn't say a word. I simply nodded once, the smallest acknowledgement, then turned and walked out through the crowd. No shouting, no confrontation. Just silence that spoke louder than anything I could have said. By the time I reached the street, I could already hear raised voices inside. Camille's frantic tone, Robert shouting something, the chaos of a perfect life collapsing in public. The next day, my phone exploded with missed calls, messages, and emails. Camille's name appeared again and again, unread. I didn't answer. That evening, she showed up at my apartment. Her makeup was smeared, her dress from last night wrinkled, eyes swollen from crying. She kept knocking until I opened the door. She started with excuses. She was lonely, confused, pressured. She claimed Jake manipulated her, that it was a mistake that meant nothing. She said she still loved me. I let her talk. She was unraveling fast, desperate to stitch something back together that was already ash. When she finally stopped, I asked one question. How long was it going on? She hesitated, then said, about a year. That was all I needed. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just told her to leave. She begged me not to ruin her career, that she could fix the gallery's reputation if I helped her do damage control. I laughed, not out of cruelty, but disbelief. The arrogance of still thinking I was part of her rescue plan. After she left, I sat in silence for a long time. I thought it was over. But fate wasn't finished twisting the knife. 3 days later, I received a package at work. No return address. Inside was a manila envelope filled with financial documents, bank statements, wire transfers, invoices from Jake's company to Camille's gallery marked consulting services. The sums were absurd. Tens of thousands of dollars. Some labeled private acquisition consultation. Others had no description at all. It didn't take much to understand. Jake wasn't just her lover. He was paying her, disguising the affair as business. He was her sponsor, her silent backer, her safety net. I didn't know who sent the envelope. Maybe one of Jake's associates who wanted to protect themselves. Maybe Robert. Maybe Linda. But whoever it was, they just handed me the missing puzzle piece. The next morning, the story was everywhere in local art circles. Gallery scandal. Director's affair exposed at charity gala. Photos from the event had leaked. The frame, the faces, the chaos. It was all public now. Jake's company suspended its sponsorship. His wife filed for divorce within a week. The board of his company opened an internal review. Camille's gallery shut down temporarily, but everyone knew what that meant. I didn't speak to her again. I didn't need to. I'd already said everything through that photograph. Sometimes revenge doesn't need words. It just needs a moment, one that catches everyone watching. But even then, there was still a strange emptiness in me. I thought exposing her would feel like victory. Instead, it felt like silence after a storm, calm, but haunted. Still, I knew one thing. She'd built her world on deception, and I'd taken away the one thing that held it together, control. And that, I realized, was the only closure I was ever going to need. The scandal didn't fade. It detonated and left a crater. Within 48 hours, everyone in Camille's professional circle had heard about the gala incident. The photo of her and Jake spread across art forums, gossip blogs, and social media faster than any press release or gallery had ever managed. Her name, once tied to rising success, was now dragged through comment sections alongside words like affair, embezzlement, and fraudulent funding. I tried to stay out of it. I didn't answer calls from journalists, and I ignored messages from friends who wanted the inside scoop. But it didn't matter. The story grew on its own. Her parents released a short public statement about being deeply disappointed by recent events, which only confirmed the rumors were true. Camille called me several times a day for a week straight. When I didn't pick up, she switched to long, emotional emails that filled my inbox with apologies, explanations, and sometimes threats. One morning, she wrote that if I didn't talk to her, she'd make the truth public, but she never said what truth she meant. Maybe she wanted to scare me, or maybe she was bluffing. Either way, I didn't care. The truth was already out. A few days later, I got a call from Robert. He asked to meet again, and this time his tone was different. Not apologetic, not angry, just tired. We met at the same diner as before. He looked smaller somehow, as if the scandal had physically taken something from him. He thanked me for being civil through the chaos and said he understood why I'd done what I did, though he wished I'd handled it privately. I asked if he'd known about the money Jake was funneling to Camille's gallery. He didn't answer directly, but the silence was enough. After a long pause, he admitted that Camille had always been drawn to shortcuts, that she'd never been content with earning things slowly. Her parents had covered for her before, smoothed over small scandals, small debts, small deceptions. But this time, he said quietly, we can't clean it up. He told me they'd withdrawn financial support from her entirely. They were selling their vacation home to cover the gallery's outstanding debts since their family name was tied to it. Then he said something I'll never forget. If she calls you again, don't answer. Let her burn her own fire out. That night, Camille showed up at my building again. I saw her from the window before she even rang the bell, standing by her car, wrapped in a coat, hair messy from the wind. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. Against my better judgment, I opened the door and let her up. She sat on the couch without asking, eyes darting around the room as if expecting to see traces of herself still there. Everything's gone, she said finally. The gallery, my accounts, my job. They all think I stole the donations. Jake's wife posted that picture of us on her company's page. My parents won't even speak to me. I didn't respond. I just watched her. She went on, said Jake had cut her off completely, blocked her number, and left the country to avoid the investigation his board was conducting. The money transfers between their companies were being audited, and she was being treated like a criminal. Her voice cracked when she said it. I didn't steal anything, Daniel. He used me. I could almost believe that part. Jake had always looked like a man who only invested in people he could own. But I also knew Camille wasn't innocent. She'd built the stage herself and stepped into the spotlight willingly. When she realized I wasn't going to console her, she shifted tone. You could help me, she said softly. You could tell them you knew about the donations. That it wasn't personal, just business. You'd be saving me. I almost laughed. The woman who betrayed me, lied to her parents, humiliated herself publicly, and took money from her lover was now asking me to rescue her reputation. The audacity was almost admirable. I told her I couldn't. Not because I wanted revenge, because she needed to face what she'd created. She left without another word, slamming the door hard enough to make the walls shake. The next week, Camille officially resigned from her position as gallery director. The donors demanded restitution. The board filed a civil complaint. Jake's wife filed for divorce and leaked screenshots of bank transfers and emails to the press, proving the affair had started long before anyone suspected. Camille's name became radioactive in the art scene. No gallery would hire her. No collector would buy from her. She tried to pivot into freelancing, selling consulting services online, but the scandal followed her like a shadow. 2 months later, I learned she'd moved out of town. Some said she went to live with a friend in Seattle. Others said she was working in a small craft store under a fake last name. I didn't verify any of it. The curiosity had burned out by then. As for Jake, his fall was steeper. The divorce settlement cost him nearly everything. His company's board voted to remove him as CEO. When the audit concluded, it turned out some of the consulting funds he'd paid Camille had come from a shared investment pool, which triggered a full-scale financial probe. He wasn't charged criminally, but his career ended quietly. Meanwhile, life around me began to normalize. I sold the apartment we'd shared and moved to a smaller one on the edge of the city. It wasn't about running away. It was about starting somewhere that didn't smell like her perfume or carry the echo of her lies. I kept working, avoided gossip, and turned down every offer to tell my side of the story. It didn't matter anymore. The truth was already self-evident. A few months later, I went to a new art exhibit downtown. It was hosted by a different gallery, smaller, humbler, but run by decent people. I wasn't there to dwell on the past. I just wanted to see what honesty looked like in art again. In the last room, tucked between abstract pieces and quiet sculptures, I saw a photograph that stopped me cold. It was a reprint of my old photo from the gala. the one of Camille and Jake on the porch. But this time, the image had been edited, cropped tightly, so only the faint silhouettes remained under the light. The title beneath it read, Exposure. And beneath that, in small letters, Donated anonymously. I stood there for a long time, staring at it. I didn't feel anger or triumph. Just a strange, clean stillness. Whoever had placed it there knew the story behind it, but no one else in that room did. To them, it was just a haunting photo about secrets. To me, it was closure. As I left, the gallery director thanked me for coming and said something about how art has a way of turning pain into permanence. I nodded, because he was right. Outside, the evening air was cool and quiet. The chaos was gone. The noise of betrayal, humiliation, and vengeance had finally died down. What remained wasn't bitterness. It was peace, stripped bare of illusion. Camille had destroyed herself chasing something she could never keep. Jake had bought power only to lose everything it could buy. Her parents had learned what enabling truly costs. And me, I'd learned that the most satisfying revenge isn't loud or cruel. It's simply walking away while the world watches the people who wronged you unravel themselves. I never saw her again. And for the first time in 2 years, I didn't want to.